Good evening, everyone. I'm Billy. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to Monday night. We will open with the serenity prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Big thank you to someone in this group. I was sitting at a meeting. Some newcomer had a particular situation that I knew someone in this group had in their own recovery life, and was able to quickly connect those people. And so that I make that reminder because I say it all the time. While I'm also guilty of saying that sometimes first legacy only AA is dangerous in AA, because the big book without the traditions can be dangerous. But I also know this: if you get lost in service and you're not on the front lines of Alcoholics Anonymous dealing with newcomers coming in, there's really no service to do. I mean, if you're voting on the future of AA and how we can better serve people, it is the front lines of Alcoholics Anonymous that are the most important. So tonight we talk about the G.S.R, and I'm sure some of you have heard before, it's the most important job in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so if you've heard that before, if you read the G.S.R chapter last week, you're probably saying to yourself, wow, the most important job in G.S.R in AA is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, and not even full pages. So while there's a lot of information in the book, there's a lot of information about being a G.S.R that is not in the book. Some really important topics that I'm going to try to go over tonight, because they're the ones that really G.S.Rs face the most. And probably one of the ones that's like the elephant in the room that you're not supposed to ask yourself, but it's a really good question to ask yourself if you become a G.S.R is it a group that you just became a G.S.R of? Or is it a meeting? Because if it's not a group, there could be other challenges that you're going to face. So you should know that. And you should get a hold of the AA group pamphlet and understand the difference between a meeting and a group, which I don't have time to go through the AA group pamphlet tonight. But there's a difference between a meeting and a group. And one of the other things it doesn't talk about is who is the G.S.R in front of you, and not really who they were. That's who they are is not important. What they did is very important. And I can give you some examples. If they did not submit receipts for their G.S.R related travel, then you're going to look like a jerk when you do. That's just a fact. I mean, and we hope that everybody would be understanding, but you have to know. Sometimes we talk about that. I do not believe getting G.S.Rs back to their second assembly or second district meeting is our toughest assignment. Now, I know that's tough. And I talk about it often that we should make sure that service looks attractive and we're bringing our recovery to service. But we make jokes sometimes, oh, after what somebody witnessed, they didn't want to come back. But truthfully, that is not our biggest hurdle. Now, I know sometimes G.S.Rs are elected at other times of the year, but for the most part, November and December is big G.S.R election time. We'd like to think that your group elects your G.S.R at the same time your area is electing a delegate, but that doesn't happen everywhere. And if you're a new G.S.R, you don't even understand what that means anyway. I mean, that's just a fact. But I would tell you, our biggest challenge is not electing G.S.Rs. Our biggest challenge is getting them to their first district meeting or first assembly. That is the largest challenge. And let's go to that election meeting. And if you're talking about, some of you have a lot of experience and some of you are new, but if you're a member of your home group in good standing and you really care about it, look at your election procedures. Do you elect GSR after like electing the alternate greeter and alternate anniversary cake person? Like, is it like the 22nd thing down on a list that you elect? If it's the most important job and you want the best person in your group at that time to handle it, maybe it should be closer to the top. I mean, we're not supposed to talk about what's more important, what's not more important, but I can tell you this. I have facilitated election assemblies in, I don't know, it's over 15, less than 20 areas where I've been the guest who's the neutral facilitator from outside the area. And I can tell you 100% of the time, 100%, the delegate is the first election. The alternate delegate is the second election. The area chair is the third election. So we can talk about that. AA has bought, I think, into trying to be super equitable long before there was no field day and no first, second, and third place in the regular world. AA gets kind of a little, but the truth is, there's a reason we elect the delegate first. Because if the best person available to be delegate got elected alternate registrar first, that doesn't help us. And so I really want to stress that the GSR at that particular every 2-year election cycle should be up near the top. The other thing is, don't elect any GSRs who went to get a cup of coffee or went to the restroom. We don't want any of those GSRs either. We want people who want to do the job. And that means I have to talk about, what about if you're a group that didn't have a GSR? Then you need somebody to explain what a GSR is. That's really important. If you do get elected GSR, you want to talk to the person who was GSR before you in a non-judgmental way. Because if they never went to a district meeting or never went to an assembly, you don't have to judge, but it's going to help you. You at least know what you're taking over. You know what you're going into. But if you do get elected GSR, I mean, I love it says what it means to be a GSR, qualifications for GSR, duties and responsibilities, but it doesn't say what should you do before you actually become GSR, after you're elected, before you start. I can tell you at the General Service Office, at the General Service Board, the AA Grapevine Board, and the AA World Services Board, there is a transition succession memo after every term of office that every current person who's serving in that position completes that memo to give to the next person, to let know, what am I working on? What's going on right now? Now, we don't have to be that official for GSR, but I'm going to tell you the important things, because a lot of you probably new GSRs are coming to you for help. And that's the most important thing we can do here, is hopefully you're all out there on the front lines interacting. Some of you maybe have never been a GSR or a new GSRs, but for the others, it's the GSRs who get elected who are going to be coming to you for assistance. And so maybe there's 3 weeks, maybe there's 5 weeks that they have before they become a GSR, before January 1st comes. I can tell you what happens to the delegate before January 1st. They get a welcome kit from GSO, the newly elected delegates, with a whole bunch of information in really organized memos and a letter telling them what committee they've been assigned to, and a letter and something in there showing all the dates that are going to be important to them in the next year or 2 years. Like the conference dates are already set for that year and the next year. So when we have a newly elected GSR, we should try to spend some time telling them, find out when your district meeting is. Find out when your assembly is. I've been guilty of this myself, and I've started to now bring this up at my home group. I will bet you if I took a survey here, it's less than 50%. In my groups that I've attended, it's been worse. But how is it possible we elect a new GSR without telling the people running what the dates they have been committed to are going to be? We know those dates. We know the district meeting is the second Sunday or the third Wednesday or bi-monthly on Tuesdays. And we know when the assemblies are. That would be good information to have when you elect the new person, so that they're not walking into a buzzsaw. Like, hey, we elected you GSR, and now we're going to tell you the dates you have to be available. Well, when the chairperson stood for election, they knew that your home group meets on Monday nights from 8 to 9 o'clock every week. That's why they stood to be chairperson. They don't travel on Mondays. They're available on Monday nights. They have childcare on Monday nights or whatever else is in their life. But sometimes we don't do this for GSR. And it's something we should really think about. And, I want to, whether it's good or bad, if I give a shout out to a certain area, if it's something that should be improved, I get hate email. If it's something that's really good, then people get jealous that so I'm not going to say what areas, but there is an area out there that has a new GSR information sheet. There's more than one, actually. But they make that available for groups so that when groups are electing GSRs, it reminds them, let them know when the district meeting is. Most areas know their quarterly or bi-monthly assembly schedule for the next year, some of them too. That's really good information to have when we elect a GSR, before we even get to what do you have to do. So I talked about the money a little bit, but these duties and responsibilities, the term of office is 2 years. Should you be a GSR for 6 years? I would say probably not. Now, if there is someone here from way northeast Canada, like where the First Nation tribe is a Nukkatuk, and there is only 5 people in your home group, and you have to trade jobs all the time, or sometimes hold more than one, what I'm going to say does not apply. And all I would say to you is thank you for your service. But if you are for the normal run-of-the-mill job, no one needs to be a GSR 2 or 3 times in a row. The term of office is 2 years. Sometimes we have GSRs quit in the middle, resign, get a new job, move. The best case scenario is that the person who is elected, maybe it's the alternate, to finish that term, is then eligible to serve their own term. So maybe they did 11 months of the old term and 2 years of the new term. That's perfectly okay. But before we get to duties and responsibilities, besides asking, when do I go to assembly? When do I go to district meeting? If you've been a member of your group and you can't remember the last time a GSR gave a report, then you have a big problem. That's almost worse than asking for money, because alcoholics, if they have it, they'll always pay to get rid of any nonsense or anything that's distracting in their life. So they would gladly give you the money, the mileage to drive to the assembly. They'd almost pay you double if you didn't give a GSR report. I hate to say that, but you have to find out as your group and getting a regular GSR report. And you have to be practical about this. I do not believe, every once in a while I go to a group where during the regular section of the meeting, the GSR gives like a 2-minute highlight report. I think that's awesome. But most groups, for the most part, it's at the business meeting where the group members attend. This is where we have the big disconnect between what's going on in AA and all the people who say, oh, they changed that in secret in the middle of the night. Yeah, there's no changes in secrets in the middle of the night. There's just a lot of people who don't go to their home group's business meeting. That happens all the time. But you have to judge your audience. How much can your group tolerate without stopping listening or wanting to shorten your time? And this is where you probably need some kind of service mentor or service sponsor. I do not think every GSR needs a service sponsor, but you can get one. But you need someone who's been an effective GSR, who can share with you, how did I do it at the business meetings? Probably the best trick out there is to always start with something that's controversial. Because while alcoholics don't like to pay bills or mileage, and alcoholics don't like, boring GSR reports, they do love a good controversy. They do love even something that could be remotely tied to sounding like a conspiracy. Alcoholics love that. And so you have to start with, sometimes we talk about the right of decision, like that only the people at GSO use it, or only the area delegate uses it. But truthfully, the GSR really needs to embrace concept 3 about how do you work with your group and be an effective GSR. So it's super important that you kind of think about that before you start being a GSR. The other thing is timing, and we don't talk about that. It says to the newly elected GSR, read AA's legacy of service. Consider assembling the publications below: the General Service Representative, the AA Group, Self-Support, AA Tradition, 12 Traditions Illustrated, 12 Concepts Illustrated, and then it goes on to books, 12 and 12, Service Manual and 12 Concepts, AA Comes of Age, or Great Responsibility, and Language of the Heart. There's nothing wrong with that information, except what I just read to you for the average alcoholic who might be 2 or more years sober, who's getting their life back together. I just read off to you like 8 months of reading if you give it like 3 hours, even a week. So there's no chance that you're going to have all this read when you start. But what's really important, and what's not talked about here, is the kind of calendar of events. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, it is what it is. GSRs are elected in the fall and start on January 1st. And anybody who knows me knows what I call that time of year. It's playoff season in Alcoholics Anonymous General Service. It's like football. There's games on Saturdays, like it's playoff season. No new GSR ever has that explained to them. And so here's the other thing that's super important. If you're taking someone through this book and they're a new GSR, like, when is the first district meeting and first assembly after they're elected? Super important. There's a chance you have a GSR who gets elected who doesn't know what the General Service Conference is. doesn't know what the final conference agenda is or background material. I go through all of these things. I'm just going to go through them quickly. Duties and responsibilities, and I'm not going to read the whole bullet point, but regularly attend assemblies, regularly attend district meetings, regularly report to the group about what's going on in general service, participate in district and area service meetings, work with the group treasurer to develop seventh tradition support for the general service board, the area, and the district. Keep the group up to date on the latest AA literature and service material, new literature, new applications of technology, literature and service material to increase accessibility in AA. Supply the DCM or district registrar with up-to-date group information. Serve as the mail contact for GSO. Keep the alternate GSR informed and involved with all the latest information to the group. What is not there? No mention that 6 weeks after you start, the final agenda for the General Service Conference will probably be out by February 15th. No mention in the service manual. How about this? Background material. No mention of what is background material. What does it mean? Now, there's a lot of us here. I have my AA Geek to the 100th power Dropbox section of all the background material for like the last 40 years, right? We're not talking about me. We're talking about a new GSR. Like, you start talking about final conference agenda and background material, and they're like, what? 6 weeks, February 15th. So it's really important with new GSRs that we explain to them, listen, there's probably going to be an area assembly in January. Most areas have that. But the next assembly in March or April is going to be the pre-conference assembly, where we're going to review, in most areas, a lot of the agenda items for the business meeting for the United States and Canada, where all the area delegates go with the trustees and the directors and staff to get the group conscience for USA as a whole. That is not talked about anywhere in this chapter. What's also not talked about is the GSR needs to understand that February 15th date and what's the next assembly, or in some areas, delegates do it in districts or in standalone meetings, sometimes on Zoom, where they go through the agenda items and get feedback. Well, if you take February 15th, I'm going to take February 15th of 26, just so we're dealing in real life. I'm going to use my business meeting, which is the third Thursday of the month, for the primary purpose group in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. But let's just say next January, the 15th is a Sunday. The 16th is President's Day. GSO is closed. If I'm going to make an educated assessment based on my years of experience, the background material is probably coming out sometime late in the week of the 16th, because the 16th is President's Day. So let's take my group, for example. The third Thursday is the 19th. There's no way my GSR is going to have information about final agenda items or information from the delegate or from the district chair or DCM about background material. So then let's go to my next meeting, which is March 19th. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks after the background information comes out. Does my group have the March business meeting? Now, why is that so important? Like, why do I drive that home? Because for my group, next year, by the time our business meeting happens in April, it's too late for the delegate assembly or the delegate feedback meetings. Now, I hope someday we back up these dates to give GSRs more time, but that's not what we're dealing with right now. What we're dealing with is that GSR needs to know that they basically have about 4 or 5 weeks to get information for their group to digest, to give them some feedback to give to the delegate, however your area receives feedback. Now, a brand new GSR, new to general service, even someone that served as an alternate, they have to have a relationship with a mentor or a DCM or a district chair, whatever, DCMC, whatever you call it in your area. And really the most important thing that mentor can do for them, the final agenda is probably going to have between 60 and 80 items on it. And you probably should show that new GSR the agenda for the year before so they understand how it's laid out, that it's laid out by committee. The committees are laid out in alphabetical order. And then to help your GSR or whatever GSR you're helping, understand that they probably don't have time to bring every item back to their group to get feedback. That they have the right of decision is to find out the important items to bring back to their group. Now, I wish every group would put 4 hours aside and have a special business meeting and review all the agenda items. I'm just a realist. I know that doesn't happen. But I also know that it's impossible for a new GSR to pull this off unless they have help from somebody who's walking them through it and giving them a lot of advance notice, like in December, this is what's going to happen in January and February and March. One of the other things it doesn't talk about in here is elections. We all know, because we all run into them, we have lots of people who complain about what's going on in AA. We know that. It'll never stop. It'll never change. But a lot of people don't realize when they get all pissed off about something, I don't care if it's the preamble, the plain language big book, the 5th edition of the big book, which is coming out. I don't care what it is, whether you're for it, against it, doesn't matter to me. Like, I don't think a lot of people at the group realize that when you elect your GSR is going to elect the person who gets to vote on that stuff. Like, that's one of the most important things to let the group know that the GSR is going to do. They have a vote for the area delegate. Most GSRs. I know there's some outliers out there, but it's super important. People like to throw a lot of blame around, but the person who's elected gets the ultimate right of decision at the conference. The service manual gives some wiggle room that there might be a time an area could instruct a delegate to vote how to vote. Sure, it says that. But for the most part, we don't instruct our delegates. We let them get as much feedback as possible. However, what we do get is our group gets a vote as to who gets to be delegate. Because when you elect a delegate, what you're really electing is someone who gets to sit in that room with 134 other people and gets to vote. That's what you're electing. They might be really good at giving reports. An effective communicator, we're going to talk about that, is a big part of being a delegate, for sure. But at the end of the day, they're in that room. They have a clicker in their hand. That's how they vote electronically at the General Service Conference now. You're putting all your trust in that person, that they're going to vote what's best for AA overall. They're going to take into consideration all the feedback from your area. But they're also going to take into information that they hear at the conference that is shared from other people who are voting members. But we really have to stress that to groups that that's who you're electing. And that's another place where somebody who's kind of a neutral mentor can really help the G.S.R. Now, we get some overexcited people for sure. And maybe we get some G.S.Rs who are not happy with how their area is operating. That happens every once in a while. That doesn't mean they're wrong. Doesn't mean they're right. But we should try to help new G.S.Rs get used to speaking at the microphone. Because I left my own area assembly in January, and somebody said something to me that a couple of people were all pissed off. And I said to that person, I said, you know, I was in the room. I did not see any of the people you just mentioned to me go to the microphone and ask a question. Like, we have to start sharing with G.S.Rs. Like, that's how they participate in most areas because of the size of the assembly. And I'm not sure people warn G.S.Rs about that. Like, hey, when you go and represent our group, you might have to get online at a microphone. And in a lot of areas, they time you and give you 2 minutes. And how about this? In all of this I just read to you, what it means to be a G.S.R, qualifications, the duties. When you go to the General Service Conference, and by the way, if anyone's been to any of these Monday night things, you know we do not debate conference items. So I'm just going to let you know. The item I'm bringing up has nothing to do with any of the debate this year about the document, how the conference operates. I'm not debating the new one, the old one, anything in the middle, could care less. But I am telling you what is very helpful as a delegate is that when I got my binder, there was a simple 1-page document there that said how the conference operates. I could go to it right now. Let's see. I'll bring up a recent year where I was a trustee, like in 2016, 17. Let's see. Procedures. Okay. So I just brought it up. In my manual, my binder was a simple PDF printed out that said summary of conference procedures. What's the conference quorum? What's substantial unanimity? What's minority opinion? What's the general rules of debating? What does tabling a motion mean? What does calling the question mean? What is reconsideration? What is a floor action? Listen, I am well aware, okay? I know that my tendency to want to know everything right away is way out there, okay? Which some people would say is just basically arrogance, right? So I'm telling you right now, when I went to my first General Service Conference, you know what I did with the summary of conference procedures? I left it in my binder. Let me tell you how good that worked out. The first 2 times I went to the microphone in 1999, I got called out of order, okay? That's how well it worked, okay? Now, I might not have learned the first time, but after the second time, I learned. You know what I did I've been a voting member at 10 general service conferences. You know what I did? I ripped it out of the binder. I put it in my jacket pocket, or I put it out in front of me where I was sitting for the conference. You know, I've visited over 80 area assemblies, and it shocks me that we don't give that to GSRs. We expect GSRs to show up. Now, if you're a delegate and you go to your first general service conference, even if there was no summary of conference procedures, at least you're talking to someone who's probably been in general service for 10 or 20 years. Reconsideration, minority opinion, tabling, those are not new items. But we send GSRs to their first assemblies with no cheat sheet, no simple document. Now, I say this all the time, like, if your area doesn't want to do it, well, then your district should. What would be wrong with your district arming your GSRs with a little cheat sheet of how it operates? What's the area going to do? Make some kind of centralized proclamation that districts are not allowed to tell their GSRs or help them? I don't think so. All I know is this: a new GSR needs that. And we don't talk about that at all. There's no section in the service manual, and I'm not complaining about the service manual. This can't be everything. But the GSR is so important. If you send a new GSR to their first assembly without telling them about microphones and motions and how business is handled and who gets to second something and who gets to vote, it sounds like the head is going to spin off in that meeting. Like, we really need to help new GSRs. Here's the other thing. I'm sure this is the same way in a lot of areas. So it's not only my area. So any area officer or anybody else in my area that complains that I'm saying something about my area, I'm not. It's basically this way in every area. Now, some areas, and again, we don't explain this to GSRs. Some areas meet one day and have an assembly. And you drive to it and you drive home. And then some areas have an area committee in between assembly meetings. But some areas have weekend-long assemblies, Friday to Sunday. Some areas, the GSR really only has to be there like Saturday and Sunday, but it's a weekend. So you know what I see happen all the time? The outgoing GSR, who knows they're not going to the January assembly, does not make a hotel reservation. And then the new GSR gets elected in December. And if it's like my area, the block fills up like the day it goes open. But a lot of areas are like that. So that's what we're welcoming the new GSR to. Oh, by the way, it's a weekend away, but the hotel is already sold out in the group package. So you'll have to find a hotel close by or pay more for a room that's not in the room block. Nobody takes the time to sit down and talk to GSRs about how do you get a room for the assembly? Where does the area post it? And the point I'm trying to get out is our jobs as mentors to new people in service is not to regurgitate the service manual. And the service manual is descriptive, not prescriptive. It's not a policy document. You ever see somebody at your area assembly? Sometimes you see it at the general service conference. They're running up to the microphone with the service manual in their hand, and they are about to call somebody out. But the service manual is not a policy document, which gets me to my next point. A lot of areas, even though it's called different things, have kind of their own service manual. So that becomes very complicated. Some areas have what they call an area handbook. Sometimes it gets a nickname by the color of the cover, the green book, the red book, the brown book. Some areas have guidelines that are on their website. Some areas have a list of every motion ever made and a book of current practice. If you asked the new G.S.R. to read every motion made in the book of current practice, their head would basically spin off for sure if you gave them a short amount of time. But it's really important that your new G.S.R. knows that the service manual does not cover how their area meeting operates. That is covered by some document or handbook or guidelines that the area has put together. It's super important that we give that information to new GSRs. I personally think the most important thing for a new GSR, like I think you can take up to 6 to 9 months to really working with a new GSR, or if you are a new GSR, to get a mentor to work you through how area works. What are the area guidelines? The pressing priority is the conference. The pressing priority is that 6 weeks after you take office, the final conference agenda will be out along with background. And so, whenever if I start to help a new GSR, I always kind of put the conference first, and the timeline, and how they're going to work with their group to get feedback. And then we can take the time to go through how that area operates and how its meetings really work, because legitimately there is only so much time to get this done. And, it can be very frustrating, extremely frustrating. If you're a new GSR and you're just dropped in an assembly and all of a sudden this general service conference is happening. And, the last thing I want to talk about as a GSR is change. AA service is an interesting place. We are like the mixed messages kings and queens of the world. We go out and we tell people we really need people in service. We really need more groups to have GSRs. We need it. We need help. We need help. But then sometimes some overly ambitious person, that's what they're accused of being, shows up and they have a question or two about how things go. And what I want to share with you is it's okay to be an agent of change in Alcoholics Anonymous service. There is nothing wrong. As long as you accept it's probably not going to happen on your time frame. If you do have a great idea, somebody else 5 years from now is probably going to get credit for it when it finally does get approved. But one of the things that's the greatest thing about new GSRs and new people to service, and I say this about myself included, is that, I work in the world of really large construction, and I work in a world of particularly problems on really large construction, like things that don't go right with tunnels, dams, bridges, stadiums, skyscrapers. And here's what I've learned about that. And it's taught me a lesson about life in general. If I go to a building, condos are a good example because they're like the same units built on top of each other for like 30 or 50 floors, right? Well, if the balcony on the second floor is wrong, I will tell you the balcony on the 19th floor is wrong. That's what happens, right? Like it just gets done over and over and over again. And in certain places, especially coastal, that deal with salt water, when you're walking around, you don't realize the corrosive effect that air off the water has on buildings and cars, but it does. Here's what I've learned about this. What does it have to do with AA? If I go to a building that has 70 bad balconies, if I ask the person who is responsible for running that project, they will tell me it's the greatest building ever built. It's the most perfect building ever built in the history of building. That's why we should always not be afraid of a second set of eyes. And in service, we grow so attached to how we do things that we just do it over and over and over again. And I'm not telling you to show up at your first assembly and be the number one troublemaker in the back of the room, questioning everything. No. I want you to be effective. But I am telling you that there's always room for improvement in every organization. Always. But unfortunately, there will always be people who are brought up in the system and kind of indoctrinated, and they don't like to hear that someone might think something could be done better. But that's what we should be getting from our new GSRs. We're not looking for the GSR of 1992. We're looking for the GSR of 2025 to tell us what their group needs, from the district, from the area, from the general service office. And so, it's interesting, change is difficult. It's one of my favorite subjects about in my work life, my nonprofit life, my AA life. Change is difficult. It comes hard. Institutions, not only AA, become more about protecting the institution than about the mission. It happens to every large, pretty much charitable organization, religion, everything else. It's like we're going to just protect what we have. And we forget about our mission, which is facilitating 12-step work and doing for the groups what they can't do. If you're a change person, I will just tell you there is a great TED Talk out there. I am not endorsing it. I'm just telling you that this guy liked it. I really liked it. I think it's one of the best ones out there. I forget the name of it, but if you Google the doctor who discovered pediatric cancer from X-rays and TED Talk together, it will come up. And it's a fascinating story to me, and it's taught me so much about change inside organizations. Probably a lot of you didn't know that. I didn't know that some lady back in like the early 1900s who was a doctor. There weren't a lot of doctors who were women back then, if you didn't know that. And if you didn't know this, a lot of babies started dying of cancer, a lot of toddlers, a lot of young children. And when they looked into it, they realized it was the children of people who were well-to-do. So it was really bothering people like, wait a minute, don't they get better medical care? And what this woman discovered is back then, they were the only people getting X-rays. They were the only ones who could afford a new technology called X-ray. And you can bet your life that the medical establishment celebrating the invention of the X-ray was not happy to see some young woman doctor come along and tell them that they were causing pediatric cancer. But why do I tell you the story? Because I think what she did is ingenious. She hired a person whose only job was to counter her every argument. And that person just was like the devil's advocate against everything she proposed. And I only say that because if you have a new idea for change after you serve as a GSR, or maybe some of you have been GSRs already and you're already in and you're currently in area service, get a second or third set of eyes around what you're doing. The other thing, if you're a new GSR or if you're helping a new GSR, here's what I would tell you to do. And now I can say it because I keep getting older, so the world keeps moving on. But thank God I can use 20 years now safely. Because the one thing I know about 2005 is there were laptops and area committees and area assemblies and people doing service had computers. Some still had word processors left over, but some were using computers. They might have been using square discs to save stuff or CDs, but the reason I tell you this is because one of the things that you should really look at is get the assembly agenda for 20 years before you started as a GSR and take a good look at it. Is your area meeting on the same day of the week? Does the meeting start at the same time? Is the agenda exactly the same? Is the order exactly the same? Because in the rest of the world, something that's 20 years old that doesn't change dies or goes out of business. And we also have to look at who we serve. The service community has changed. And I've seen it because, again, I've started to get old in AA. And I even just bought pizza tonight and Italian food. And the guy who checked me out said, you know, for a guy who's as old as you wear pretty cool sneakers. And I was like, wow, that's a nice compliment on my sneakers, but not sure I needed to hear that tonight. But I'm going to tell you this, that I got active in service in the early 90s, meaning that a lot of the leaders in service at that time, who had already been in service 20 or 30 years, got sober in the late 60s or the 70s, right? Some in the early 80s, but most in the 70s and the late 60s. If you look at the service landscape of GSRs back at that time, a lot of it was male dominated. A lot of it was based around people who worked Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 jobs. So a lot of district meetings were always at night or on the weekends and assemblies. And I'm not saying that should change. What I am saying is it's okay to look at the AA population that wants to serve now. And is the times we meet and the days we meet the same now as it would have been in 1975 or 1980? And so you can tell from what I'm saying that, like, I am not an opponent to change. I'm an opponent to change for change just because you want to change something. But I'm a huge proponent of change that better serves Alcoholics Anonymous, that better serves the groups, that lets more people participate in service. Those things I couldn't be a bigger proponent of change of. But again, if we don't sit down with new GSRs and walk them through these couple of pages and then explain some of the things that I went over tonight, it's really hard. It's really hard. The GSR participation rate at most areas is very low, super low. And so we got to do all we can to get, I don't want meetings, but I want as many groups as possible getting a GSR. So I'm going to go to questions. Please send them in if you've never been here before. Someone asked, can I get a meeting? Can I get a recording? Yes, I'll put my email in the chat. Just send me an email and I can send you a link to the recordings of all the Monday night. Or there is a secret Facebook group. You can ask me if you're on Facebook, how you can get in there. But I just sent you my email. Okay, question. In seeking a service sponsor, do you see a potential problem with it being the previous GSR for the same home group? For clarity, the person who comes to mind from me is the current GSR. I was asked to stand as alternate for a home group in 2026, which means I potentially would be a GSR in 2028. Would it make sense for the GSR in 2025 to be my service sponsor, or should I find someone outside my home group? Well, here's what I would tell you. I'm not sure in 2 years as a GSR. Maybe there's a person who could pick up a new information to help someone else along. I think the GSR could tell you and share with you what they did. And I don't think it has to be a service sponsor, but you should probably get a mentor who has 5 or 10 years or more of general service experience, who understands the flow of information, who understands the upside down triangle, who understands all of those things, who understands how the area works, who understands what an advisory action is. I'm not sure getting someone who is just the GSR, not unless they have a ton of experience. Um, I think someone from your own home group is not a bad idea. If someone from your own district. Um, the challenge today is what I see happening a lot with service sponsorship is it's become like political parties. That's what I've seen. I believe in calling balls and strikes, regardless of who's pitching and regardless of who's batting. It doesn't matter if you're my best friend. It doesn't matter if I can't stand you. Like, I got to deal with the issue by issue. But I can't say that I haven't seen like service sponsee groups voting in block. Of course I have. Unfortunately, I've seen some group text threads or WhatsApp threads of like service sponsorship groups. Like, I won't do it. I won't even, if somebody texts me during an assembly, answer a question. I'll say, listen, you had plenty of time to prepare for this. It's not my job to tell you how to vote or what to do or anything. Service sponsorship should be more about the information and the principles and not the individual issue. My job is to prepare someone with the information and where to find the answers in AA literature. How I particularly feel about that issue should not be an important discussion between me and somebody that I'm helping. So I hope that helps you. Let's see. What would your suggestion be for a meeting that holds business group conscience by text message? Yeah, to stop immediately, like yesterday. There's no way to get an informed group. Listen, if we have another lockdown, then get everybody on Zoom and have a 2-minute each person and have a real group conscience. You can't get a group conscience by text or WhatsApp. You know what I see happening in text and WhatsApp groups? It's like the greatest creator of new resentment 4-step inventory writing capability ever invented. Like, that's what I see. People writing stuff they should never write. People saying things they should never say. One person dominating the conversation. We shouldn't be doing group conscience by text and email. And I totally support tech, but that is not a way to get to an AA group conscience. Thoughts on nominations from GSR for members of the group, then voting versus announcing we need a GSR. Let secretary know if interested at the end. Yeah. There is in AA literature regarding, it says no personal nominations. I don't like nominations in Alcoholics Anonymous. I agree with the literature. No personal nominations. Nominations look like, oh, that's Billy N's candidate. That's Billy N's stamp of approval on that person. Who gives a shit? Sorry, what Billy N thinks. Should have nothing to do. We should ask who is willing and able and qualified to stand for this position, and let each of those people stand and state why they're qualified, and hopefully ask them to leave the room so that you can have a vote without insulting anyone or anything else. And just when they all come back in, the chairperson says who won. But personal nominations look like personal endorsement, and they just don't work well in Alcoholics Anonymous. Can you give some of your experience with alternate GSRs? Example, how common is it for them to become GSR? How has that worked out with elections because the alternate has experience over other candidates? So I would say this, the alternate GSR is no different than any other alternate position. I've seen a lot of alternate GSRs become GSRs. I've seen a lot of alternate delegates become delegate. It's good, tried, true experience, and it can make perfect sense. But I've also learned this. If you're a bad alternate GSR who never shows up for your commitments, you're not going to change when you become GSR. If you're a bad alternate delegate, you're not going to become all of a sudden a great delegate. So I think there's a lot of value in being an alternate, but it should not be a rite of passage. It should not be a guarantee. The group should be able, or the district or the area, to be able to elect the best servant at the time. You mentioned the procedure of the area meeting in the cheat sheet you pulled. Can you repeat or point to the document you referenced, which isn't in the service manual? Yeah, it's called How the Summary of Conference Operations, How the Conference Operates. There was a big debate this year about changing it. Talk to your delegate about that. What I will do is have Dee post one in the chat next week, so that you can see the one I was referring to. It's not in the service manual. Like I said, the service manual is not a policy document. It's more of a like owner's manual kind of for a car, kind of helpful hints, but doesn't really tell you anything exact how to do something. But I'll gladly share that document with you, of course. Is it better to have someone in your district to teach you how GSR works, or can it be anyone who's been a GSR? So here's an important question. I think sometimes, and this is recovery and service, okay? It always sounds better or cooler to have an out-of-town person, right? Like, it always sounds cool, right? It could be the right choice, or it might not be. But I will tell you, because each area and district does things different, even if you have a service sponsor from outside your area, you should have someone inside your area who you trust and helps you, because they'll know how things operate there. It's impossible to know all 93. It's just impossible. As for a cheat sheet, would a suggestion to boil down this section beginning on page 173 appropriate for the group conscience of the area and the district? Hold on, because I don't know 173 by the back of my hands, but I would tell you, you need one that's more your area or district specific, not one out of the service manual. Group. So if I read this wrong, the person who sent it in, please send in a correction. The question says, group me in my home group has caused serious misunderstandings of what a group conscience and form because of 2/3 of membership is not on group me. Group me must be some app or something that people use. Again, it's hard to use the AA group conscience procedure and suggestions in the AA group pamphlet on some kind of WhatsApp or text thing. You can do it properly in Zoom or other, uh, GoToMeeting, Skype, where you can have everybody participate equally. What role does a GSR have in the safety of the group? Good question. That's up to the group. The group should have its own kind of safety discussion, and I've come to group conscience about how you deal with safety related issues. I've seen some groups that have safety, like interim sponsorship people. They have 2 people raise their hand. These are the 2 group safety people. If you have an issue with safety, please talk to them after the meeting or during a break. But that's up to the group to decide. What was the very first advisory action? Was it the changing of our name from the Alcoholic Foundation? Where would we find this information? The Book of Advisory Actions? Yes, but unfortunately, I would need to go back. Like the first, what does that mean? The first one that they did at the first conference? But the first conference was really a test. It really wasn't official until 55. And then, so if you go to the history of it, advisory actions, it's by committee and by year. The Alcoholics Foundation was changed by the board before there actually was a general service conference. So the Alcoholic Foundation voted to change their name to the General Service Board of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was later ratified by the conference. Any other questions? I know we went late. I apologize. The recording will be out tomorrow. Next week, we will be on chapter 2, the district and its district committee member. I'm going to give a big warning. We have areas with sub-districts. We have areas with county DCMs. We have DCMCs. We have some areas that have zones. We have some areas that have regions, even though we have regions inside. DCM and district committee member, district chairs, DCMCs, county DCMs. You might want to take a look at your area guidelines on this, and how your area operates, because I can only give a high level. G.S.R. is easier to talk about for all 93 than DCM is, because of how different it is in a lot of areas. Some areas have county-sized districts. The area that I live in, a county is a district. And then there's sub-districts. So that means my district has more groups than some areas. That's what that would mean. Some areas, a district is truly handled by a DCM and only has like 10 or 12 groups and is a small geographic piece of property, a couple of square miles. So please read that section, but you should know that, and it's something you should find out about your area. So with that, if there's one last question, where can, as a member, see or be able to read this past year's conference decisions without filter of an individual or their interpretation? It's a great question. So if you're taking notes, you might want to write this. The week or 2 after the General Service Conference, there's a couple of documents that are provided to every delegate. The first one would be recommendations made by a committee that failed. So that means a conference committee made a recommendation to the whole conference, but the conference did not approve it. That's one document. Here's another document. Recommendations that received the majority vote but did not get 2/3. That's another document. Then advisory actions. Those are the recommendations that received 2/3 approval from the conference. There are 3 PDFs that go out with all that information. Later on, the conference report book is put together, which lists all that information. But I understand the person's question, because if you go to individual delegate reports, which there's 93 of them, sometimes it could sound like they were all at different conferences. Like, wow, are you talking about this year's conference? Because I just heard a report and it sounds very different. That's one of the challenges of the world today, because, you know, when I became a GSR, very few people ever heard a delegate's report from another delegate. If they happened to live close to a border, or maybe they were visiting an area. But that never happened. Today, we have hybrid, we have, totally virtual. We have people who sometimes go to different delegate report backs, and the best I can say is it's like the big book. Where's my big book? Hold on. Here's my big book, right? I have a non-conference approved WARF rat, one show at a time, right? Sticker, right? That's not AA approved, right? But if I open my big book, like, I got all the good fancy notes, like any good big book thumper, right? I even got different color highlighting, pink, yellow, and orange, showing that I've highlighted at different times, right? I got notes in between the sentences and along the columns. You know what that means? That has nothing to do with it in the book. That happens to be my personal interpretation, or what someone else told me. The book is the black ink that was printed when I got it. That's the book. And I would tell you the same thing about conference. A delegate may be able to give you the overall flavor, or maybe give you help understanding how a vote didn't pass or pass, or what the discussion was. But when it comes to the reporting, it's the black print on that PDF. And you should get that. So with that, we will close with the responsibility statement after a moment of silence. I am responsible when anyone, anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there. And for that, I am responsible. Thank you, everyone. And again, the big thank you to the person who their hand was available today. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Take care.